this is where people who have had nonlinear careers become your superhero. I grew up at a time where women chefs was not a thing. The first day I show up is this like 5-star hotel kitchen. It's nothing fancy. There's like bulk cooking for banquets. And I show up and they're like, okay, you're working in the bakery. And I walk in, it's 200 men and 17-year-old me.
Just had the pleasure of sitting down with Puja. What an incredible discussion. Puja is an amazing bundle of energy with an insightful intellect and a great understanding of the renewable energy culture and sustainability in Australia. She had a non-linear pathway to renewables. She studied science and food hospitality and then concentrated on innovation. In that time, she's also lectured at Monash University. She has many strings to her bow. This is a really interesting conversation and she's definitely coming back for part 2. So strap yourself in, sit yourself down, or is it the other way around, and get ready for a lot of fun, a lot of energy, and a lot of information. But before you do, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Now, you're there's West Bengali blood there,
Yeah.
isn't there? Because I asked Jayesh upstairs, I said, Puja's coming in, this is her surname. Where's it? He goes, West Bengali.
Yeah.
And Satwik said the same thing. So
Yeah.
they're two of the engineers.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Let you right at the end, and they said, yeah, West Bengal. And they said, I don't know about the other name.
Yeah, so I recently got married in January, and my husband and I, we took each other's names. So we both are, so Currer, he is from Yorkshire, and so Currer is his, and Ganguli is mine. And so we hyphenated it.
Right, so your husband's from Yorkshire, but how do you pronounce his?
Currer.
Currer. Is that a common English name? I've never heard that name before.
It's got Irish origins.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, right.
And yeah, so his dad's family can be traced back to sort of the Irish gypsy background, and then he grew up in Yorkshire.
Yeah, right. So he's got Romany blood.
Does.
Yeah, wow.
The joke is that he's basically Indian, because if you trace Romani heritage back, it originates from Rajasthan.
I thought so. It was because a lot of people think Romani Romanian, but it's way before that, isn't it?
No, yeah. So there's this amazing documentary, I'm forgetting the name now, but essentially it follows how music moved. And so they see the commonalities between the different tribes and gypsy communities from Rajasthan all the way to Central Europe to Ireland, Spain, that whole part of the world. And you can see like huge threads. And funnily enough, we were watching Peaky Blinders last week, the new one.
Yeah,
and
right.
one of the characters, her name is Kalo, which means black. And that's how you say black in Bengali.
Right.
Yeah, and so my husband and I were like, "Oh my God, this becomes even more real."
Stories like that really do show that interconnection between all things. It's funny, like my father is dead now.
Yeah.
I'm half Serbian, right? So mum's Anglo, and there's a famous Serbian movie called Black Cat, White Cat, and it's about gypsies.
Yeah.
And the music, and you hear the music, and you go, "That music's similar to what they play in Turkey," because obviously. That area was under the Ottoman Empire. And food, music, if it's good, doesn't matter where you're from, you're going to like it, aren't you?
Exactly.
And dancing too.
And I mean, it's also culture of community. I think it's really interesting because when I talk about people, I think people, so I'll take my partner and me as an example. He grew up single mom, single kid in a little village in Yorkshire.
Wow.
Now married to me, who grew up in this giant Bengali family. We were like 20 people living in the house that I grew up in, because it's a
extended family,
extended family, intergenerational. My dad and all his brothers basically lived in the same building, and I'm the youngest of all the cousins. So I had a cousin who's 18 years older than me.
Were you spoiled?
Yes, but also I grew up with like 15 male cousins, so 15 boys. So I became very comfortable with being as they like to call it, the gang leader.
I see.
Or in a more corporate spleel, I'm very good with working with diverse teams.
They're great skills to have.
Yeah.
It's so you've met your husband in India or over here?
Yeah, we're here. Very old school. We met through work.
Wow.
Yeah, he was an industry partner when I was working as a lecturer at Monash, and we, worked in the same industry. We are very similar people. We were both migrants. He moved here from the UK 10 years ago. I moved here from India 10 years ago. And we've always been outliers. We've had very nonlinear careers. We never fit in where we were born. We are very, very curious about the world. And so I guess it just grew from that.
So I'm going to get, because we talked about this off camera, the nature-nurture question. That behaviour, who you are, I mean, is that a nature thing or is it a nurture thing or is it a combination? Like who in your family is like you?
Very interesting question. So I think it's a bit of both. So for context, my family are originally from Bangladesh, part of Bengal. So Bengal was one big state. When India got its independence, partition happened. It was split into two. So around that time, so in the 50s, is when my granddad moved over to India or West Bengal and started from scratch. And he was incredibly smart, incredibly worldly, but in his own way. Never traveled outside the country, never really traveled outside the state, but was entrepreneurial in his own ways. Similar to my dad, I think he's very worldly, but again, very similar. He was the first generation in India who was post-independence, building careers, building businesses. For him, the motivation was to make sure he was looking after his family. And he had a business in construction, so he did a lot of government tenders, so on and so forth. But his heart was always in impact. So he, from as young as I can remember, I remember him spending at least 3 days a week working on projects for Rotary International. 30, 40 years down the line, he still is a passionate Rotarian. He works on a global scale. He heads projects across South Asia. And I think that's where the impact came from. But if you look at it, again, very different context, where for him it was around the community he lived in. And when it came to me, I think it's definitely a combination of nature and nurture, because nature, I've always felt different. I always felt like I wanted a life that was much bigger than what I was maybe born to have. I'm the first woman in my bloodline to move out of home before I got married.
Wow, that would have been that's a big thing, isn't it? Even now, or even 10, 15 years ago. How long ago did you get married?
I got married this January.
Oh, okay.
But I moved out of home when I was 17.
Wow, wow.
So
what were your parents' reaction to that?
See, I always joke about this with my dad, and I say, you knew you were raising trouble, so you have nothing to complain about.
Oh, nice. Turn it around. I like it.
I feel like, as a parent, what... that's the nurture where I will give it to my dad, who never made me feel like I couldn't do anything.
Wow.
I remember being in this all-girls school, and I never felt like I couldn't talk to men or boys. I grew up around brothers.
You had lots of cousins who were male.
Exactly. And so I never had that differentiation in my head around I'm a girl or and it's something that's really real in the Indian context. At least it was in my generation. And it's on him because from when I was very young, he was taking me along to places. So I would go along to his Rotary meetings and sit on the floor and draw while I heard 40, 50-year-old uncles, as we call them, discuss how to create water projects or sanitation projects or polio drives or all of that. And so I grew up with big ideas around me. And then when it came to independence, he was very strong on, I was part of this thing called DIAS, so the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, which is essentially designed to take young people out into nature. So I would go hiking in the Himalayas from when I was a teenager. Something that no women for sure, but also not a lot of my male cousins were doing in my generation. But Dad was really strong on you need to go and you need to see the world and you need to be open to experiences. And so...
Very wise man by the sound of it.
Yes. And so I always say that he made me brave to dream big. And to his luck, sometimes those challenged him.
There's a lot of subtext there. I can hear. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it's to come back to nature and nurture. It's both. You can have it in your nature. You can't live that reality if it's not in your nurture.
You did right. I do agree. It's a mixture of both. I've spoken with a lot of engineers, and invariably from a nature perspective, they all break things apart when they're young, wanting to know how things work, and sometimes trying to get them back together most of the time, not successfully. So, but of course, it's the nurture side, what you learn, and who your role models are. Did you have many mentors or role models when you were young, growing up, that you really had a big impact?
It sounds hilarious, but my first dream was to be a chef. So when I was about 13, 14, India got the Travel and Lifestyle channel come through. And it was life-altering for me because it was just opened my mind up to this world that was beyond anything I'd ever imagined, because it would have travel shows on it. It would have cooking shows on it. And the stories that I'm told of being a young person is since I was very young, like I'm talking 9, 10 years old, I would sneak into the kitchen and I would be so fascinated with food and cooking. By the time I was 13, I was cooking for 20 people.
Wow.
And in India, that is really unique because women are encouraged to cook, but that's from a patriarchal lens of you get married and raise families and you look after the kitchen and all of that. But for me, it was a very different thing. I was curious about ingredients and I was curious about the storytelling. Because you have to understand, I come from essentially a refugee family. So my grandparents didn't have a lot of wealth or possessions to pass on to us as grandkids. What they did have were recipes and stories around it. You know, we ate this particular vegetable this time of year to celebrate this goddess, or this grew in the land that was around our house in Bangladesh. And so it was that very young, as you say, like an engineer being attracted to technology. For me, it was people and storytelling. And that sort of then got fed quite intensely when I found out who Anthony Bourdain was.
Ah, yes.
And I think he just challenged everything, you know. I'd never seen anyone who was like him.
You can still watch those that show he had, and it's so relevant now. Very sad how he what happened.
So sad.
And really honest. Seemed to be a really honest individual and passionate, but really no nonsense either.
Absolutely. But what was so unique about him was he was political. He never shied away from addressing that food, culture, music, all of that was political. And he explored these spaces he went into with that lens. And it was about the people he was meeting and understanding their circumstances. And for me, that was mind altering, because it suddenly, the thing we ate became more than just that.
More than just sustenance.
Exactly. And it was like a vehicle to understand society. It was a way to understand how different hierarchies and communities worked and what was the history of a place. And so I think that just drove that fascination with chasing a career as a chef. And again, for context, I grew up at a time where women chefs was not a thing.
You're pushing a lot. Back then you were pushing a lot.
My poor father had to have a very hard,
Because he would have had conversations with your other relatives and friends going, what's your daughter doing? Why is she doing this stuff?
Yeah, it was, the man, I'll give him one thing. He's never said no. He's very strategic. And I'll give you an example. So I completed my 12th grade exams, and in India, it's very competitive to get into university because, everything's through entrance exams, there are very few spots, and you want to get into some of the best colleges that there are. So when my father figured out that this madness about studying hospitality and being a chef was really not going away, he gave me 2 conditions. He said, I'm happy to support this if A, you can get into the best school in the country. Mind you, I was a very average student.
Wow.
That was condition 1. And condition 2 was, you don't understand how cushy your life has been so far, growing up in a middle-class family. You haven't worked a day in your life. You need to work for at least 3 months.
To see what it's like. Yeah.
To see what it's like.
Wow.
And he was right. I was naive. I had never worked a day. I, was wrapped in cotton wool as the only daughter, the youngest sister, all of that. And so he thought he had, outwitted me, and he somehow managed to help me to find an internship. And the first day I show up, it's this 5-star hotel kitchen. It's nothing fancy. There's bulk cooking for banquets. And I show up and they're like, okay, you're working in the bakery. And I walk in, it's 200 men and 17-year-old me.
Really? Gee, they must have all just gone like this.
Yeah, they're like, what?
Wow.
And I think my dad in that time would have been like, oh, she's not going to survive a day. Little did he know he had not raised a quitter.
That's great. Wow.
And I loved it because it just was so new. I was that curiosity, and I just had the best time. I got my 12th grade board, your 12th grade result while working at this place, and they celebrated me. It was incredible. And as luck would have it, I somehow managed to crack the entrance exam and got into one of the best hospitality schools in the country. And that's how my journey into training to be a chef began.
On that note, I haven't asked this of other guests, but do you think there are some people, I gotta be careful, who are born luckier than others? Or do you make your own luck? It sounds like things have flowed so far, because I haven't heard the rest of your life, but things have flowed sort of how they were supposed to flow. Not saying that there was no input from you, there was a lot, but are some people luckier than others, in your opinion?
100%. I think success is a combination of luck and hard work. You can work really hard, but if circumstances don't align, you can't go through those doors. And one thing that even living in Australia, I have become very conscious of is the privilege that I had from day one. Growing up in a middle class family in India itself was a privilege. Being able to go to a school where I was, learning 3 languages from day one was a privilege. Having a father who was very supportive and never really pulled me back or held me down to the societal expectation. Absolute luck that I had that father. However, it was also on me as an individual to say, do I have the gumption to push through? Do I really care about something to really chase for it and have courage to fail? Because a lot of these things that I did and till date that I do don't have a very specific success rate or success matrix that I can look at and be like, okay, like the risk here is about 70-30. No, it's not. So you just have to have the ability to trust your gut and the resilience to push through when it gets really hard.
And not, by the sound of it, not to be complacent about where you came from, like how
Absolutely
you grew up.
not.
And I think it's good advice for everyone to rejoice the fact that we are still alive and hopefully relatively healthy. And yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, do you think, like, I'm going to talk about the karmic aspect because obviously from an Indian background, that fate and karma, it does play a role, and doesn't, like where you were born, who your parents were. I mean, things you can't control, but I suppose everything happens for a reason, doesn't it?
I grew up quite in a spiritual household is how I'll describe it. And one of the things that has become quite a base for me is to really appreciate the past, be thankful for the present, and be excited for the future.
Nice.
Because you are a collection. You're a collection of all those three experiences. And it's really figuring out what you want to put into the world, because you will get that back in some version. And if I was to think of it, how that has played out in my profession, the two things that have driven me have been curiosity and impact. So if I trained to be a chef, got hired by this food magazine called BBC Good Food, moved into food journalism, got really, worked in that for about 5 years, somehow ended up working as a ghostwriter for one of the best chefs in the country when he was researching ingredients that we were getting lost in India because of large-scale agriculture and global food systems.
All those old rice varieties that have now gone and replaced with GMO
exactly
crap. I said that. That's my opinion, by the way.
No, it is true. And there's actual evidence of how that's impacting the rates of diabetes, the rates of blood pressure in our communities. So I was ghostwriting with him. He gave me this book called The Third Plate by
Dan Barber.
Yes.
I've got it at home. Great book.
Changed my life.
It's one of those books, if you read once every 2 years or once a year, because you go, I forgot about that bit. I forgot. That's a great book.
And that's why I'm in Australia.
Wow.
Because of that book.
Wow.
Yeah. So I genuinely think that my life is a culmination of me putting that energy out in the world or chasing that karma of curiosity and impact, where I kept looking at things that I could work on that would create good in the world and kept chasing it with a curious mind rather than thinking around accumulation. So be that wealth, experience, so on and so forth. Yes, that happened along the way, but that was never the motivation. And so the career I've built out of that has now reflected years of just being open to the universe and following paths that appeared.
I love this. We just had a short break because it's raining cats and dogs. I don't know, is that an expression in India, raining cats and dogs?
It is. Definitely an expression, because it does rain a lot in India.
The whole food's fantastic because it brings people together. And as we talked about before we started off camera, if it tastes good to one person, it doesn't matter their culture, it's going to taste generally good to most people. I'd like to talk about community, because you mentioned something about uncles, right?
Yeah.
And that's a term that Indians use, and also the indigenous population of Australia uses it. And my wife's South Korean. They use it as well.
Yeah.
A lot of cultures do.
Yeah.
But Westerners tend not to. Why? I know it's a strange question. Why do you think that is? Like,
I don't think it's a strange question at all. You have to understand I'm married to an Englishman.
Yes.
So we talk about this all the time. And my hypothesis is it's the difference between collective cultures and individualistic cultures.
Right.
So if you look at, say, Australia and India as two examples, in India, you are part of a social fabric that kind of holds each other up. So if you fall, you have more than just your immediate circle to hold you. It does have negatives of people. A lot of people are involved in your life, and it's complicated to navigate that as well. In Australia, it's the opposite. You have huge freedoms to be who you are, and you have space to do that. But you also have very strong boundaries around who is close, who is not, who is part of your immediate family, who is not. And that's why a term like an uncle seems too familiar to use for someone who is not related to you. I grew up in a family where I was raised by my uncles and aunties. And I am an auntie who was raising my nieces and nephews since I was a teenager. And I care about them in a maternal way. And that's just how it works. When I moved to Australia, I was just so amazed at how lonely parents can feel, especially young parents, because it feels like raising children is a solo act. And it just boggles my mind because it's so hard. You just can't do it. And people talk about, it takes a village. I don't know if it exists in the same depth.
Well, the thing is, it's a time thing, because if you go back however long, there were obviously there was village and communities, and let's say rural agricultural in the West, parents are working in the field, someone's looking after the kids, whether it's a relative or a neighbour. And then the next step is extended family, and still in parts of Europe, Italy, Greece, some of the Slavic countries, you've got your grandparents living with you. And then the next step is, and I'm going, these are not nice, these are bad steps, is the nuclear family, which is even being broken down even more, all under all under the, I suppose, mantle of consumption and capitalism. We've got to be careful. I've got to be careful here.
No, on board with you. So for context, we are moving to India in May to start our second head office in Calcutta.
Wow.
And because we travel quite a bit around APAC for work, it was a question around, do we get our own home? Do we move into the family home? And
so I just hit the keyboard then in excitement. So please put your go on.
And it was a whole thing around, I think I was more nervous around moving in back with my dad, with now being married and having a husband and my husband moving in. What surprised me was just how excited my husband was to move into the family home. Because, like I said earlier, he grew up as a single child. He's extremely social. He's like an extroverted extrovert. And his life's dream has been to live in a big, thriving community.
Wow.
And so he is beyond excited to wake up and hang with my dad every day. And my cousin lives downstairs and they get along like a house on fire. And just this extended community and the ease of it, where we can just walk across 2 buildings down to my auntie's house at any point to have chai. And you just feel part of something bigger. And it's taken me a while, because I moved out so early, to sort of almost accept that I deeply miss it. I miss being part of a community that genuinely has each other's back. and shares resources. And it comes down to also the work that we do around, you just need to hold spaces for people to feel comfortable to get to know each other, and solutions will come. You can solve the biggest problems if you create space for genuine community.
And what helps obviously is knowing that there is a solution out there, because there always is a solution, isn't there?
Absolutely.
It might take a lifetime to get there, or it might take a couple of minutes, but there is always a solution. Now, the whole food side of things, you were a ghostwriter at one stage. Well, I want to hear that story. I really do. That sounds very interesting. As much as you can say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So essentially what it was this really, really amazing chef called Gresham Fernandez. He actually worked at Noma at one point, had come back to India, and context, this is like 2013, so it's been a minute. At that point, he had a food lab, which he was running. He was heading one of the biggest hospitality.
That scares me when I hear food and lab in one sentence.
It was the most happy space I've been in my life.
Wow.
Because it was just curiosity. He was a kindred soul where he just wanted to learn about what was happening. And his day job was to create menus and restaurants and all of that. But this was his passion project, where he wanted to understand what was the impact that globalization was having on our food systems, and down to the impact of what the smallest farmer was growing on his acre of land and bringing to the fresh market. Because that's where the major change happens. Because the moment the demand for that seasonal vegetable is gone, that very poor resource constrained farmer will not grow it anymore, because he has to sell everything he's growing to sustain his family. That was sort of where that project was around, and I was, doing some work with him as a part of that. And I was in my mid-20s then, and I'd worked in food and hospitality and had been in food journalist for about 5 years by then. And I remember talking to him around how I was getting interested in sustainability. And again, like I mentioned before, he gave me the book, Third Plate, and I just blew my mind. And I think I was a bit influenced growing up in Calcutta, because I grew up, so Calcutta had a communist government for 20 something years.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yes. So I grew up in a very politically aware family. So I had an uncle who was part of the Communist Party. So summer holidays, in the morning, we would be painting.
Working.
Yeah, basically like painting posters for his bookstores. He used to run these communist bookstores at fairs. So we would be painting his posters for him. And then my dad is is in the sort of left center, and we would have incredible conversations around politics. Politics was never off the table at dinner, which again, I'm a very big fan of. And then I had an uncle who was quite right. And he was an artist, and he used
a right-wing artist.
Yeah, it's crazy. And he would record these radio shows. Do you remember those? Like the political radio shows?
I do.
And he needed background artists for that. So in the evening, we would go and do all the running around and the background noises, essentially. So I was growing up quite politically aware. And the more I got into sustainability and food, that really came to the forefront as well. And this book really made you question capitalism and big agriculture and the energy that went into big agriculture, and how the fabric of India was changing with this new wave of global brands coming in. I still remember the first McDonald's I had, and I was a teenager. That's how late it came into my city. And now my nieces and nephews, it's everyday sort of a brand for them. We purely shopped at fresh markets growing up. My dad took me to the butcher, to the fishmonger. I saw where meat came from day one. The next generation, no idea, because supermarkets became a thing within one generation. And so the loss was personal, where I was seeing this, like the speed at which we were losing indigenous knowledge, produce, way of living, way of cooking. And I was just like, I have to learn more about this. And as luck would have it, my sibling had been in Australia for about 10 years by then, and I'd traveled to Australia to visit him a few times and just looked around and found this master's degree that Monash was starting at that point, and it was interdisciplinary. So you could study sustainability no matter what your education or professional background was. And
I was going to ask, so what did you, at uni in India, what did you study?
I did a Bachelor's of Science in Hospitality, Food and Hospitality.
Science and... I can see the logic there.
Yeah, because
wow.
you study. So it was a really unique degree where you studied food science and hospitality. And part of that hospitality was I specialized in being a chef. So
Wow.
Yeah,
So we don't have that in Australia, do we?
a lot of it is diplomas here.
Yeah, William Angliss College is one of those well-known ones.
Yeah.
But the fact that the science and the hospital, that makes sense. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was a 3-year degree. And it was incredible. I loved it. But that then gave me the opportunity to do a master's in science.
But you could have done one elsewhere instead of Australia.
Yeah.
So why Australia?
I think it was...
Everyone, all the Indian people I've asked, they look at, in no particular order, the US, England, Canada, Australia.
Maybe it was the personal connection. Because my brother had been here for about 10 years before me.
Right.
And because I traveled here since I was about 18. And I, had family friends essentially because he was really close to his best friend and their family. And we had gone on family holidays together to Greece and all of that. So I felt almost part of a social fabric moving here. And they're still my Australian family. But he lived in Adelaide and I refused to move to Adelaide.
Sorry to any of our Adelaide.
I love Adelaide. I call it Radelaide because I think it's absolutely rad.
Very nice. I've heard that before. Probably won't hear it again, but
I think it's absolutely rad in the month of March. And then something happens and they're like, well, we're just going to drink our wine and chill.
Yeah.
But most importantly, it was because I loved the degree that Monash was offering.
Right.
And it was just those 2 years of doing that master's, it changed my brain chemistry.
For the better, I hope.
Oh my God. It was like my brain was on fire in the best way possible. And I'm a big advocate for people studying later in their lives.
Yes.
Because you're ready to learn. And I had the most diverse cohort. We were the first batch to do the master's. And
You were the guinea pigs.
We were the guinea pigs, yes. It's a well-known fact.
Yes.
But I had colleagues and students who were studying with me from all over the world. We had an age bracket, age difference of about 20, 25 years between the youngest and the oldest person who was part of the cohort. We had people who studied fashion designing, architecture, people who are marine biologists, one of my closest friends, he was a sports journalist for The Age who had moved into sustainability. And you just learned to think differently. And you learned how to look at things from these diverse perspectives and understand the superpower that all of us brought to the table. And eventually, you just started to understand that these complex problems we were learning about, no one person could fix it. No one discipline could fix it. And no one country could fix it.
So this is the thing. It's a really good point that you pointed out. I couldn't think of a better expression. But we live now where, let's go back 200 years. There was no such word as a scientist, but there was people who studied a bit of physics,
Yeah.
mathematics. They had a wide range of knowledge, but now we specialise, and when you specialise, you become a bit siloed unless you're willing to interact and communicate your ideas with another branch of science. Problems are really hard to address.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment? Like, no, that's the way I see it. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just even beyond science, though.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get stuck even, like, we want to collaborate, but then still have boundaries. We just need to open it up completely.
But how do you balance that? And this is a question I ask myself every day. How do you balance that against the economic reality of the world we live in, where you have to make dollars? And we're talking about globalization. We're talking about big agriculture, big pharma. That's sort of the antithesis in a way when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's an easy solution. If there was, we would have done it. However, this is where people who have had nonlinear careers become your superheroes.
Because they're more worldly from an experience perspective, aren't they?
Yes, and they bring different skills to the table. So if I was to talk about the work I've done, say, in the energy sector, I was looking after strategic partnerships for AGL's innovation portfolio. Now, I didn't have a background in energy before I moved into that role. However, I had a background in innovation. So before that, I helped design this innovation unit for Monash, for students that was all around solving complex problems. I had a background in community and stakeholder engagement, where, because sounds weird, but I studied hospitality. I knew people.
Yes.
And I can read people and I can understand what their motivations are.
And you like people too.
And I like people.
Yeah.
And so I was great at stakeholder engagement, and I had a strategic brain because I'd built a startup and I had worked in consulting and I'd worked with government. And so by the time I put all of those skills in my toolkit, I could translate it to energy. For me, what was interesting was it was a hairy problem. And I could use things like communication and storytelling and building relationships and understanding how we brought different stakeholders on the same table and really target each of their needs in this journey to unlock that critical value proposition for the end consumer.
Wow. Not many people in my experience can do that.
I think we don't give nonlinear people the chance to do it.
Yeah, I reckon you're right.
I think there are a lot more people around us who have nonlinear careers. However, even today, if you look at how jobs are advertised, it's very, it's still very specialist focused. And there's a huge need for that. Don't get me wrong. But you need the outliers who think differently, who in Hindi we have a word called jugaad.
Jugaad.
Yeah, jugaad, which means it's another way of saying hustle. But it's the ability to get shit done.
Right. So are you the kind of person that can get to the essence of something fairly quickly from an understanding perspective?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
One of the engineers I worked with, so I used to have a consulting role where I used to help build technologies for different levels of government, so sustainability reporting technology. And I worked with one of these engineers who was a genuine genius.
Not many of them out there.
Yeah, like an absolute genius. But he really struggled to communicate his ideas to our stakeholders. And my job was to literally book in half a day with him with a whiteboard and get him to just write and talk at me. And I would sit through it for about 2 hours at a go.
Wow.
And at the end of 2 hours,
You're exhausted? No,
I love it.
No, so I'm teasing.
No,
I
it's
can
exhausting.
Yeah.
But it's, for me, I get a lot of joy of taking really complex ideas and turning it into a simple,
palatable,
palatable, communicable piece of information. And so I would take that 2 hours of us working together and turn it into about 5 lines. And I would say, is this what you're trying to get across? And if the answer was yes, I would be like, great, let's move on and try to break this down. If the answer was no, we would go back to it and understand which bits I had missed out and what was the critical information that needed to be added to that. And it's not a simple process, but different brains work differently. You just need to get the right people in the room to help each other out and say, I cannot solve problems the way you solve it. I cannot see how a local council can report into federal sustainability policy. That's not my expertise. But I know how that local council can create a framework that they can use to easily communicate the impact they're having to a state or federal agency.
Wow. Again, I'll say it again. That's a rare skill. It is a rare. I take my hat off to you because I know I've met a lot of people. I'm old. Met a lot of people. Spoken to a lot of people. It's a rare skill to be able to do that. I want to jump back a little bit. So you've come out to Australia. You've done your master's degree, and I want to know chronologically what happened after that master's degree, until you say you got to AGL and then beyond.
Okay, so
as best you can, because it sounds like there's a lot. There's a lot there.
Again, talk about Jill of all trades. So I was a master's student, and I looked around and I tried to understand what I wanted to do after I graduated. And I needed to find a job, and I knew that, again, like the linear way would have been I did that, went into a data or a reporting role at a big consulting firm. And I had a few conversations, but it wasn't me. And I think it wasn't me, A, because maybe the skill sets didn't align, B, because the culture didn't align. I just, at that point, was at a crossroads where I knew I could either keep chasing a job or I could create something of my own to give myself the experience I needed. So I don't know if you have spoken to a lot of people who've come here to study and gone through that visa pathway.
Oh, yes.
It's excruciating because essentially when you leave your master's, they see you as a graduate and they do not acknowledge any experience you've had outside Australia. So you start at zero.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? It really is.
And it's really, really hard to then compete with all the undergrads and all the postgrads, and you just want to get your foot through the door. And I tried to do all the networking and all the applications, but at some point, I guess I got just frustrated, and I just want to solve sustainability for food businesses, and that's what I was passionate about at that point in my life. And my brother, who has a background in investment banking, and he and I were at that point housemates. We were living in the same house in Brunswick. And one day he had enough of me cribbing about this. And he said, right, if you could solve this and if money was not an issue, what would you do? And so I basically drew up this idea on a parchment paper on our kitchen floor. And
not even the table.
No, I'm a floor kind of gal.
Gotcha.
Just you can roll the paper out wider.
I love it.
And I'm a visual thinker, so I was like drawing it out literally. And it essentially came up with this software as a service platform called Consult Earth. And it was designed to help food and hospitality businesses reduce their waste and do their sustainability reporting, but with a financial lens. Because I'd worked in food and hospitality businesses for so long, I knew that there was a huge need for them to become more sustainable in terms of the amount of wastage there was, the amount of, the kind of produce they were using, the way that these businesses were operating. You have very slim margins. So
Food's hard, isn't it?
it's really hard. And so I knew I could create a product that would come from that industry perspective.
You may know Joost Becker.
Sorry?
Joost Becker. Yeah, he's he developed a few restaurants, full recycling, on-site, food waste on-site. He had was running a business in the city, running one in Perth.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'll send you his.
I'd love to.
Yeah, he was a crazy guy. Yeah, also in sustainable building as well. The whole concept. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I thought you would love it.
Basically that.
Yeah, I'll send you that. Yeah.
So that's how it's sort of.
It's all interrelated, isn't it? You can't. Again, this is the antithesis of a modern approach where I study physics and I'm a mathematician. This is this interdependence, this sustainable. It's the food, the way you live, the way you travel, where you live, what your house is.
Absolutely.
Your consumption.
And I think one thing that a lot of sustainability professionals irk away from is talking about money. My philosophy to that is you need to make it about the money. Because at the end of the day, it is still a business.
That's right.
With really thin margins. You need to meet them on a problem that they really care about. So I'll give you an example. Any restaurant has huge bills to get their waste collected.
Yes.
Because the council wouldn't do it. You have a limited amount that the council would pick up.
Can't flush it down the sink.
You can't flush it down the sink. So what are you doing? You're paying someone to pick it up.
That's right.
How do you help them reduce those bills?
On-site recycling, on-site composting is one. Yeah, and so that affects the pocket, the financial side.
And so that sort of was the whole idea around it. It's like I was trying to put a dollar value on sustainability for these businesses. And I did that about 2 years, so had no background. My brother came on board as my co-founder, and he had that reporting background, having worked in investment banking for a very long time. And we hustled for 2.5 years. We got the platform built. We started doing trials. And then COVID happened.
Timing, bloody hell. Gosh.
And we were literally in the beginning of our, I think, second round of trials. And it got to a point where you just couldn't have that conversation anymore because the industry was bleeding. And we just had to take a step back. And it was about, we took a month or so off. And after that, we just came together and we just decided that it was time to say goodbye.
It's a great idea, though.
It is. And I genuinely think that now there are a lot of tools in the market that are doing it really well. And that a lot of businesses have become way more savvy. So this is 2019. So it's been a while since I was working on this problem space. But that 2 years of being a tech founder was the best business school I could have gone to. Because it teaches you so much about trying to solve a problem with the least amount of resources.
Wow, yes.
And it is basically what brought me into innovation as a sector. And since then, I've worked so right after that, I went and worked for this consulting firm called Ironbark Sustainability.
I've seen one of their reports. Do they cater to local councils?
Yes. And so incredible crew.
So you're talking about scope 1, 2, and 3, carbon accounting.
All of that.
All of that. Wow.
And that point, we were looking at how to essentially digitize their consulting work and create a platform that would allow local councils to go through it. They have this thing called Snapshot. where it essentially gives each council their snapshot of their carbon emissions. And we were trying to find ways to help the councils to take that information and work on it and tie it to their individual strategies, with the goal that we were then going to tie that to the state government and the federal government. Really interesting work. And I loved it. I loved working with that crew. Their office is just actually really close to here. And when I was in that role, I got a call from my alma mater. So Monash, one of my professors from when I was doing my master's, who had also been on my board for my startup, had reached out to me, and there was this role available where she was building this new, really unique student experience called the Monash Innovation Guarantee, which would take students in the undergraduate degree through a 3-week sprint, a design sprint, and teach them about the innovation mindset. And she wanted me to bring my lived experience to help design that. And so I joined as a lecturer.
That's great.
I know. I never thought I would be an academic, but here we were.
But why not? Why wouldn't you think because you've got that ability to condense big concepts, detailed concepts into a palatable form? Isn't that what good lecturers do? I mean, and they can talk and they like people. Well, hopefully most.
I might come across as confident, but I still have imposter syndrome.
We all do. We all do. Wow. Yes.
A part of it was also the fact that I didn't come from a traditional academic background. I came from a very linear background, and I have so much respect for my academic colleagues who spend years doing their PhDs and doing, their research to go into these roles. And my role was unique because it was called lecturer practice, which means that in the university, you have a lot of people who go in and bring the industry knowledge to a unit. So that's what I was doing. And it was incredible. It was the best bit about it was for the 2 years I was there, I got to work with some of the brightest young minds from across the world. And really, I don't know how much they learned from me, but I learned so much from them. And it taught me the most important skill, which is how to help people build a mindset. Because that's what innovation is. You can't teach innovation.
No, I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
What you do is you create the environment that helps people build that mindset and practice thinking outside the box. And the way I put it to students was, not only do I want you to think outside the box, I want you to stand on that box, take a hammer, break it down, take it into parts, put it back together, and then decide if you want to keep the box.
Very interesting. I'm going to ask you a philosophical question. These ideas that people come up through innovation, creating in the right environment, are they created or do they already exist? Like, are they already floating around and you have the right environment to go grab? Or are you actually creating them from scratch?
I don't think there's anything unique in the world.
I agree.
I don't think there's anything unique in the world.
It's all floating around, isn't it?
And if you think there is, then you're either delusional or it's a terrible idea.
I 100% agree.
But
wow.
The one thing I will say that differentiates someone who succeeds or doesn't succeed in innovation is, do you deeply care about a problem space? And why are you the best person to solve that? If I was to think about the startup I had, I deeply cared about food and sustainability. I had lived it for close to a decade of my life. That was one answer for that question. Why was I the best person to solve that problem? is because I wasn't thinking of it from a ESG reporting professional.
Right.
I wasn't thinking of that problem space from a tech professional. I was thinking the time poor, resource poor chef or restaurateur who had to do this extra thing that wasn't directly bringing them revenue, why should they care?
You're thinking from the human personal perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow. That's the most important thing, I think. Isn't it?
And that's the difference between, being able to solve a problem or not. Similarly, if I was to look at energy, why did it interest me? It's because it affects all of us. And I was curious to see how it was going to affect the person who didn't understand anything about, solar, battery, VPP. I didn't know what a VPP was when I first entered the energy sector. I had to look it up.
Still don't. Hey, a lot of people still don't, and it's a fairly recent term.
Yeah, and so when you're telling, mom of two or a young couple that they need to think about this when they move into their first home or their family home, why should they care? And how are you making it easy for them to make that decision and say, actually, this is not just about me having immediate benefits, which I do, but it's about me future-proofing my life and my house.
Because you're competing with the everyday thoughts we have. I've got to pay a mortgage. What's happening to my relationship? Will I have a job next year? And now you want me to think about sustainability.
Yeah.
So you're competing against those things.
100%. And you need a lot of people to be sustainable poorly than a few people to be really sustainable, to create the scale of impact we need at this point of time.
Now, so chronologically, you're at this point. You're at you're talking about innovation. You're lecturing. You've got some, by the sound of it, some pretty interesting students. And I love the explanation of innovation and how creating the right environment. That makes so much sense.
I genuinely think sometimes we overcomplicate things, where innovation has always existed. It doesn't just happen in the startup space or in the tech space. I think sometimes you need to peel the layers of jargon apart and look at it for what it is. If you ask me, innovation is solving a really complex problem in a unique way with limited resources. If you just take that definition, human beings have been innovating from day one.
Yes, very true.
And the difference is we're now trying to almost really find boundaries to help people do it in their own industries or in their own countries or circumstances. And I think that's all we need to do is create those spaces. And
the boundaries are invariably number one and two, money and time, or time and money, aren't they?
Absolutely.
If we had unlimited time and unlimited money, we could, it wouldn't be an issue, would it?
I think it would be a hindrance to innovation.
Right.
I think having limited resource sparks creativity.
Right.
Think about when you make a fridge clean meal.
So what's that? What
You know when you have like ingredients in your fridge and you're like, I just need to eat through all of this.
Yeah, got you. Yes, yes.
So you just make the most random thing out of it. But a lot of times that's one of the best meals you make.
Yes, especially when you're hungry.
When you're hungry, because you're like, I have a problem.
Wow.
I have limited resources. I need to come up with a solution. And it's great. That's what really good innovation's about.
I'm digesting this. Funnily enough, we were talking about food, but no, you're dead on.
And maybe it's because I grew up in India where that is just the mindset. A lot of people don't understand how entrepreneurial people are. Even the poorest people in India are entrepreneurial. You'll not see a lot of people just sitting there and not doing anything. It's not that kind of a place. Do we have huge wealth disparities? Absolutely, yes. But even the person on the traffic light who is extremely poor or is living in poverty is hustling. They've gone and bought some stuff that they're selling at this traffic light, or they're cleaning your windows, and that's part of the DNA, because that's the only way you survive in a country with 1 billion people.
So that comes from the necessity of, I mean, if you don't do it, you don't eat.
Being resource poor.
You don't eat. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, with unlimited resources, there's no drive to innovate. Why would you?
Exactly.
You don't need to.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, my brain is going tick, tick, tick. It's just, wow.
Yeah. And so after Monash, I moved into AGL, and it was really interesting to see the innovation portfolio there, where it actually stemmed from a few of my colleagues who had come on board as entrepreneurs in resident few years before I joined the company, and they had been given a limited amount of resources to figure out this problem space of energy transition.
Yes. Now, what's that mean to you? Like, I mean, what's your definition of energy transition?
As a non-technical, non-energy person, I see it as it's literally moving or changing the way we power our lives with cleaner energy. So that could be our homes, that could be our cars, that could be our businesses. How do we shift the way we power all of these things from non-renewable sources to renewable sources?
So you're talking about humans, the drive. I mean, obviously, it's the drivers of why a human would swap to a. Am I on the right track here? But from
I always think from the human perspective, because that's just my perspective in these spaces. But it's about looking at how do we make sure that we are addressing the fact that we live in a finite world with finite resources.
Yes.
And we're very close to that becoming a real problem in us being able to maintain basic comforts of life. That's facts. What we need to do is create the ability for the average person to be able to have equity. As this whole sector goes through this massive change, it shouldn't become a burden, or it shouldn't become a problem for your average household to still have access to reliable energy, which is affordable, and which also aligns with their sustainable goals of moving to cleaner energy. And that's what the transition is all about. How do we make it equitable as our energy companies have set the goals to become more sustainable through moving their sources of energy from things like coal and gas and petroleum to renewable sources, which is a huge undertaking and a systemic change. How do we help that happen while also meeting the needs of your consumers?
And also, how do you do that when there's potential for government change just at a federal level and their focus may not be the same as the existing government?
Yeah.
The next government might have a different focus. Example, let's stay with coal or gas if it's a more conservative government.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm without saying who those governments are, but you know what I mean. So you've got to combat that as well from the perspective of when you're at AGL. There must have been talk about that without revealing anything.
And I think so. If talking about the stakeholders, right?
Yes.
So government sets direction. Your organization or big companies or energy companies, they set the how it's going to happen, and consumer sets how it's going to get adopted. With a company like AGL, if you look at the way that relationship has worked, they understand as just an independent organization, their strategy is set. They have identified, they've gone through a process over the past decade, I'm going to assume, and said, okay, we have two options. We either continue fueling our plants, coal plants that generate energy, but need an update, or we think about moving away from them in the next X amount of years into new technology, into new forms of energy generation that aligns to what will be profitable in the future.
Yes. I do their cost-benefit analysis,
The cost-benefit, make it about the money.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, they are a business after all.
Exactly. And so if you look at how sustainability theoretically is broken, it has three parts. It is environmental, social, and financial viability of solutions.
ESF.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an acronym,
Yeah.
but it should be.
Yeah, but
Shouldn't
those are the three, if you study it, those are the three parts of when a solution is seen as a sustainable solution. So you can't forget the financial.
You should
It
never.
needs to make sense. And that is the driver that can be used in sectors like energy to help these big transitions happen. And that's what we're seeing. So if you look at AGL as an example, they have set a goal in the next 10 years. They want to transition to a renewable energy portfolio. And a lot of the plants are already getting transitioned out, and that's a business decision. Does policy affect that? 100%. It does.
Yeah.
But that's any sector.
Exactly. Exactly.
Policy is ever changing. Look at technology. So much of it was unregulated for so long. But that's changing.
Oh, in the case of AI, it's still unregulated.
It's still unregulated.
Sorry. Had to throw that one in. Yeah.
Very, very relevant in today's day and age. But policy, that's the nature of policy. And you want those checks and balances to exist. You also have to take into account the risks that exist with that. However, as any organization, and this is me moving away from just AGL as a concept,
please.
just anyone who's working in the energy space right now, or anyone who's working in the climate tech space right now, we have to build knowing the ecosystem we exist in now and have a very strong future strategy that takes into account the risks that global geopolitics will have on these solutions.
Wow.
Because we don't live in isolation
No.
anymore. So right now in India, for example, huge shortages of gas and cooking gas. So your LPG cylinders. And even now in India, it is not pipeline. Most of the places have cylinders.
The big LPG.
Yeah. That gets brought to your house and
Yep,
plugged in and you
understand.
cook with it. And it's a problem because of everything that's happening in the Middle East. They have less amount of natural gas coming into the country, and it's creating a huge crisis where people are not being able to cook their meals. No one could have predicted this.
Yeah, no one who will say anything. Yes, yeah, no, you're right. No one could have predicted it.
But do you see this as is it a challenge? 100%. But it is also an opportunity for, say, someone who's working in the electrification space to say, how about we look at getting electric burners and cooktops?
Well, India is one of the fastest growing renewable energy players. Like the solar game is huge. Their own solar panels. I've had a bit of a look at this area and had quite a few conversations with Jayesh about it. Massive, huge market. Lots of sun too in most areas.
And because of the scale of the country, innovation iterates so fast because they can try and learn and iterate constantly. And this sort of brings me to what I'm doing now is I've actually moved back into entrepreneurship, and I co-founded 2 companies. So one is called Hype Man Media, where we do storytelling.
Can you say that the first name of the first one?
Hype Man Media.
Hype Man Media. Yeah.
We do storytelling in the innovation space. So we help businesses connect with their audiences through more genuine communication, both online and in person. And we teach innovators how to tell better stories. So,
must be very satisfying.
Oh, it's amazing. It's, one of those things where, and so my co-founder for both these businesses is my husband, I have to say this, and we both are big fans of storytelling, both in personal life and in professionally, and we think that's the unlock. And if you look at some of the biggest problems of connecting into consumers, it is that. Like, how do you make it relevant? How do you make a technical solution relevant to someone who doesn't know anything about? And the second business, which is relevant to what we were talking about earlier on the whole opportunity of energy transition in India, is we are actually launching it in the next couple of weeks. It's called APAC Innovation Hub.
Wow.
And it is essentially we connect globally APAC innovation ecosystems with each other. And we are cultural translators who create the bridges that allow more collaboration across sectors, across national borders, but also across innovation channels.
How do you monetize, if you can tell me, how do you monetize that?
We work on different levels. So one of our channels is we work directly with governments that run different programs, and we help them connect into the innovation communities across the APAC region. So, for example, currently we're working with the Beijing government, who run a program called Haiku, which is the biggest innovation competition in the world. And we are connecting them to Australian startups and businesses.
Wow, you must know some people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we are connecting them to businesses that want to explore opportunities of working in China. That's sort of one of the ways. The other way is we work with businesses in specific that's really interested in moving into APAC. So it could be an Australian business moving into APAC. It could be an Indian business wanting to work with China or Australia. It's not linear at all. It could be either way. But we work as their cultural translators. So that friend who takes you to a new country and tells you what you should and should not do, and is that warm, safe space for you to feel comfortable enough to engage.
If you're lucky enough to have a friend like that. Yes,
and
exactly.
So we are those people.
Wow.
And this idea stemmed from the fact that both Dicky and I, we have extensively traveled around APAC, working in innovation ecosystems, partly from our personal passion. So we've chased out opportunity to do that. And partly because I grew up in India. And we both are building a life in India now, where we are starting our second head office in Calcutta in a few months. And the one thing we constantly hear, especially in Australia, is, we see the opportunity in India. Example, energy sector. We see that they are really growing leaps and bounds, but I don't know how to engage with it. It's too much, or it's too overwhelming, or I don't know who to talk to, and all those are really valid reasons to not engage. But they can be solved. You just need the right people, and we think we are the right people. If you look at India as an example of energy transition, and then we'll look at Australia. India right now is one of the fastest growing solar adoption in the world. I think it's number 3 in solar adoption currently, and that's just accelerating more. partly because there's top-down investment. So the government's investing, there are giant solar projects that's going on in a commercial scale, but partly because this solves a critical problem for the grassroots, which is access to cheap energy. And some of the things you see there, which is absolutely not regulated, blows your mind. So one of the technologies that I've seen, which I absolutely love, is solar panels that can literally be rolled out because they're like tarpaulin. And because there's a lot of informal housing in India, they're using that as solar panels because they anyways use tarpaulin. So they're replacing basic plastic tarpaulin with roll-out solar panels. And then getting the local engineer to come up with a little device situation that creates a VPP, essentially, in these neighborhoods. Highly unregulated, right? It's happening on the grassroots level in the poorest parts of town.
But those, so you're talking about towns that are connected to the main grid.
They are.
Yeah, because there's a lot of places in India which are completely off the grid, and that's another huge
So if
market.
you look at rural parts, they might be connected to the grid, but they also have a lot of sun. And this is basically free. So for a low-income household, how awesome is that? And the ingenuity of a local, absolutely have never been to a technical school electrician in India is incredible because he knows exactly how everything is wired in that neighborhood. And so they are creating these microgrids essentially out of nothing.
So this is a classic case of innovation coming about through necessity.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow.
That's where India is at. It's got really high-end, top-down solar initiatives, and then it has this like almost grungy, local, absolutely not regulated part. When you look at Australia, we are incredible at two things. We are incredible at research, and we are incredible at policy. If you take our research and training, actually, we're very good at that. Education is one of our highest exports in this country. If you take the ability to do that research and training and how to build policy and combine it with the rapid innovation, ability to produce products fairly cheaply, and the mass market of 1 billion in India, the opportunity is mind-blowing.
But you need that interface, and this is where you're... And are you obviously looking at Sri Lanka as well?
So APAC in general.
So APAC's covering Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan.
Yeah, we're actually going to Bangladesh in July. So we're open to work with anyone. We have created APAC as a focus, given that's where most of our current work is. So we do a lot of work in India, we do a lot of work in China, we're working with some businesses in Sri Lanka, and we want to expand that down to Southeast Asia as well. We've done a bit of work there, but we want to expand that network further. And obviously Australia, because that's also home.
So you're talking just with India and China, you're talking about a combined population of 2.5 billion, all up.
If you think,
isn't it?
If you take
huge.
India, China, Indonesia, and Australia, that's 1/3 of the world's population.
Because I know Indonesia is 300 million or something like that.
So
Australia's hardly any, but we know our renewables.
We kick about we punch above our weight. But
this is where all the innovation happens in Australia, and that's where the manufacturers are testing out their ideas in Australia because of what we do with renewables. But it sounds, great idea, great timing too. I mean, just what's happening with the world. Timestamp. It's March. It's towards the end of March 2026.
Famous last words.
It's oh wow, this is so. How long's this new business, this second new business, been going?
So my partner Dickie and I essentially started Hypeman Media about 2 years ago, but I was more of a silent partner. So it was him who started it.
You were a silent partner.
I know. It's unbelievable.
Sorry, I couldn't.
See,
help
you know me for like
I-
an hour and you already know that. It's unbelievable. But yeah, to his credit,
I was being cheeky. Sorry.
I love it. Yeah, so he took the leap of faith first and started the business. And as a part of it, we were doing some consulting work for a sub brand called Hyped Global. And that's been going on for, I would say, about 18 months. The more we worked in the space, and we both also spent about 3 months in Asia last year, so end of last year to beginning of this year. And the more we spent there, the more we understood the opportunity. We realized we really needed to create it as its own business with its own legs. And so that's how APAC Innovation Hub evolved into its current form. We haven't officially launched it yet. So we launch it in end of April.
Oh, that's really soon. Wow.
Yes. And then we moved to India to basically start our second headquarters. So we are headquartering it in Melbourne and Calcutta, which is our two homes. And the idea is that we then use these two spaces to activate the whole APAC region.
Fantastic stuff. I just thought of an idea. You probably already thought about this, but your love of food combined with the whole renewable energy, sustainability, you know the concept of agrivoltaics?
No.
So agrivoltaics is the use of solar panels, photovoltaics in conjunction either with cropping or with livestock. So in other words,
fascinating.
We've actually done 2 projects where we put solar panels on top of grapevines for the University of Melbourne, and they're studying the results, and they're getting some amazing benefits from the panels being over the grapes.
Yeah, because of the shade that they can control.
But there's still big gaps, so there's enough light. We've done one on a strawberry farm. But the most viable one is where they run livestock, like sheep, on viable agricultural land, and you're putting ground mount systems. The sheep keep the grass down, and it acts as shade, and you can grow. I'll send him stuff on agri.
I would love to hear more about it.
I think India would be perfect because there's a lot of agriculture that still goes on in India.
Huge.
And not to mention there's other things like floating solar as well, which is,
I've heard of floating solar.
We've done a floating solar project as well.
West Bengal has some of the biggest fisheries because of the water. So it's essentially in the delta, right?
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah, right. So it's a lot of fresh water there.
Huge fresh water. And we're big pescatarians, so we eat a lot of fish.
Did you, as a kid, go fishing and stuff, Kat?
Not really. I'm a very urban city gal.
Right, okay.
But we ate fish every day.
Really?
Yeah, every day. So even now, it's hilarious, but I used to hate fish growing up because I was like I loved vegetarian food. But there was fish cooked for lunch every day. And now as an adult, I can't wait to go back home to eat fish every day.
Is it like, I'm slightly off the subject, but because I love fishing. Is it freshwater fish?
Fresh.
Or freshwater fish,
Yeah. And so a lot of estuaries and it's like small local fisheries and
Let's get back to your business. It's a wonderful idea. Are there anyone else is this are you the only people doing it?
I think there are lots of people working in the bilateral space, essentially what this is. And there are different ways people are doing it, where you have some people who are running delegations. There are some people who are running commercialization businesses where they work with researchers to see how you can help them commercialize businesses. There are accelerators. We see all those people as collaborators because both Dickie and I, we are people's people. And for us, as a business, the foundational principle is if we all work together, the tide rises and we all rise with it. Because the space is so vast and the opportunity is so big that you need 100 people working in this space
You're right.
to create the kind of shift that needs to happen.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Because we're talking about, let's face it, climate change, conditions are getting hotter, increased electrical loads in India, putting strain on existing infrastructure. It is absolutely perfect for renewables. And is it so are you going to be concentrating just on renewables or other sustainable approaches?
So it's really broad. It's innovation in general.
Right.
My obvious inclination is towards sustainable businesses and impact-focused businesses. But as a whole, the business itself is open to innovation in general. So, for example, you could have a health tech that wants to work in APAC, and we could work with you. Or you could have a climate tech. The reason we have kept it really broad and not gone sector specific is because you just need all the kinds of businesses you can to move into engaging more with each other in APAC. And the more, it's like if you look at venture capital, right? There are specific venture capitals that only invest in a kind of business, but mostly venture capital is designed to invest across the board, because one business might do really well, the other might not, but then that balances it out, and then you basically lift the whole innovation ecosystem when the tide rises. It's the same concept with collaboration. If we take a ed tech or a health tech business to China or India, the networks we are building are then really valuable for a climate tech.
That interdependence between things, yes.
Because you still are working with the same government bodies, or you're working with community groups, or you're working with universities, you're working with training institutes. It's the same networks that you need to have connections into and relationships with.
So only people who have had as you mentioned, a non-linear career can put all the pieces together. That's what I think after listening. And it's a great term, that non-linear, what you mentioned. Yeah, because because if you're stuck in a certain sphere, no matter how good, you can't see the big picture.
No. And it's relationships.
It's all,
So everyone keeps asking us why we're doing this move to, go to India at this point of time. And the one thing that is very clear to us is in these Asian countries, especially India and China, it's about spending time to build relationships. That is the key resource that you need to invest in, is time, patience, and commitment to say, I am showing up because I genuinely care about working with you. And that takes actual time and to be there. And we both are lucky to have, be in a partnership, in a marriage where we both support each other to do this. We both have a global mindset. We are lucky to have family in Australia and India. And I think over the past couple of years, we have realized that this is what our purpose is. This is what we are very good at, is being able to build communities and networks and tell really good stories that help eventually create impact in the world. And so if we can really focus on that and build a business that supports our lifestyle, then I think I'm going to be really happy in the next 5 to 10 years.
For anyone listening to this who's thinking, my gosh, you've ticked a few boxes, what's the best way? I know you're about to release the business, but what's the best way to find you guys? And
LinkedIn. Always a great way is just message us on LinkedIn. My full name is on the podcast.
Yeah, that's it.
But you can also look us up. The website will be live when we launch in a couple of weeks. It's called APAC Innovation Hub. HypeMan Media already has its own LinkedIn pages. We run a really good newsletter called Hype ANZ. And it is a weekly newsletter that gives you all the information that you need to know about the innovation ecosystem in Australia and New Zealand. So you can subscribe to that as well. And honestly, I love to chat. So reach out. I genuinely think conversations is the way we solve the big, hairy problems of our times. And it doesn't have to be immediately. The number of people where I've had a chat with them maybe 2 years ago who I'm working with now, because you've spent that time to understand how you can add value to each other's work, is massive. And that's how we like to do business.
Absolutely. My brain's reeling because of all the things we've talked about. And I've got a lot. I'll be digesting a lot on the way home, on the drive on the way home tonight. Thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an incredible chat.
I really enjoyed this conversation. Absolute pleasure. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much to you and the team, because there are very few times in life you meet fellow lovers of philosophy and community. So it's an absolute pleasure to be part of the series. I've been following you for a while. So,
Sammy, definitely after the website's released, maybe 4, 5, 6 months' time, we might, if you'd like to come back for a part 2. You'd be absolutely more than welcome.
Well, next time I'm back in Melbourne, I would have had a bit of APAC experience under my belt. And so I would love to come share what new things I've learned and hear more about where you are with all the amazing stuff that you and the team are doing. So, yeah, please count me in.
Thanks, Puja.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you. That was lovely. Yeah, that was...